sleeping.
Her loss. I'm about to buy a team. I want to build something special, a real dynasty. But I need a partner.
First pick, the 1979 NBA draft. The Los Angeles Lakers select Irvin Magic Johnson.
Hello again, everyone. I'm Brant James, lead writer at HeyUSA, joined as always by Nick Garcia, senior writer. Nick, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Brant, and I'm excited for this week's episode of the pod.
It's going to be good. There's a buzz about it. This episode is entirely dedicated to the new docu-series coming out called Winning Time: The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty, which is based on the 2014 Jeff Pearlman book about the LA Lakers' rise to dynasty status. And humorously, they had to change the name to Winning Time because it's on HBO, not Showtime. And I don't think that was ever going to fly.
Yeah.
But we joined on the media junket this week. We got to talk to a lot of the stars, which include John C. Reilly, Adrien, Brody, Jason, Clarke, Sally Field. There's a whole bunch of newcomers on there. If you're IMDb fans, they have no credits. There are actors in key roles. Magic Johnson, pretty key one. Quincy, Isaiah, one acting role ever on there. And the man playing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar named Solomon Hughes, quite an accomplished man. He was the captain of the UC Berkeley basketball team. He was a Harlem Globetrotter. He's 7 feet tall, looks a whole bunch like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Even likes jazz, never been an actor before, never had a role. So he gets cast in this, and it works. I got to see 5 of the screeners, the first 5 episodes, and
Nice.
They're really good. I think Hollywood and LA in general is kind of a buzz about this because it's a nostalgia piece.
Yeah.
It's LA.
Yeah.
It's got a big cast. It's also about culture. It's about time, a period of time. There's a lot of crossover. And I think it's going to gain a lot of interest, and I think folks are just going to like it because it's really well done. It's quirky and it's well done, and it really captures that period of time. So I think you'll enjoy it.
May not know this about me, but I am not a Los Angeles Lakers fan. However, I am a fan of everything that Adam McKay touches. I am a fan of these type of series, these type of shows. I do enjoy basketball. I am a Celtics fan. I think if I'm not mistaken, there is going to be hints of that Lakers-Celtics rivalry. I believe there is someone there playing Larry Bird in that show, so we're going to get small glimpses about that. But I'm, John C. Reilly, I think this is going to be a fantastic show. I'm excited to watch it when it comes out March 6th, right?
March 6th it begins. There's some Celtic elements in there. Also, Red Auerbach is played by Michael Chiklis. If you're old, you know him as the Commish. If you're less old, you'll know him as Thing from the Fantastic Four movie. But he is an actual Boston guy, born, raised, and educated in Boston. So him playing Red Auerbach is very interesting. You mentioned Adam McKay, the highly decorated, award-winning producer, director, The Big Short, Succession, various roles. There's some Hollywood drama behind this movie involving him, which adds another layer to this, which brings in the cinematic drama of it behind the scenes. He has had a long time collaboration with Will Ferrell. Talladega Nights. They did the Funny or Die video series online. Will Ferrell is very much an LA guy. He went to USA, I believe, or at least he's a fanboy, an LA guy, and really, really wanted the role of Dr. Jerry Buss, which went to his friend and collaborator, John C. Reilly. And McKay admits it didn't go as well as they would like. And Ferrell has pretty much said, we're done. We're divorced. That's another part of the backstory.
Wow.
So,
that is, I can see where that, it would be like if that was Will Ferrell's dream, growing up to do this, and then his buddy gets the role after. He probably said, hey, John is probably a guy that should be in this show, and then he gets basically one of the top jobs. And so, I can kind of see that.
The job, really, the focal point of it. It begins, with the rise of Magic and the, very much the same. Dr. Buss trying to buy the team, trying to validate himself, coming to the new town, just like Magic did. But let's get into it. Let's get into these interviews.
Yeah.
They're audio only, but we've got some pretty pictures that we're going to show. We're going to show you some of the stills and what some of these characters look like. They did a really good job. Quincy Isaiah, who plays Magic Johnson, he's actually from Michigan. So one of the questions I ask is about playing a native Michigan icon. And you could tell he was very interested in that, although he says that his hero growing up was Shaq. And he actually learned about the Lakers' backstory and the Magic backstory researching this role. So, and there's some really great parts in there. There's a scene in one of the episodes where John C. Reilly as Jerry Buss takes you through the sculpting of his hair, which involves a lot of hairnet, a lot of spray. And John C. Reilly actually grew his hair into this ridiculous form and went through this Tacoma just to get into character. So let's jump in. One of the really cool aspects of the show is they use characters in a narrator role where they talk to the screen. So here I asked John C. Reilly about that. The show begins in a way, the very first episode, the first 10 seconds, that will absolutely grab you. And he's using this narrator role. So let's take a listen to that. And the second question will be to Quincy Isaiah, talking about representing and portraying a fellow Michigan son.
Let's do it.
Thanks for your time. For John, how fun was the narrator role that's used so effectively in the show? I mean, the opening scene just grabs you, quite obviously. I mean, that looked like a lot of fun and very, a great way to move the plot forward.
Well, I'm curious to have Quincy answer some of these, but I'm happy to answer that question. What it gives the show, I think, well, for me, it was a lot of fun because I got to treat the camera, AKA the audience, as if they were a partner with me in the story. So when it's almost like a great little shortcut to making a connection with the audience. You're just not just watching me in this presentational way. I'm reaching out directly to you and saying, hey, can you believe this is fucking happening to me? It's just such a fun thing, And then once you establish that can happen in our show, then you're constantly waiting like, well, when are they going to talk to me again? We kind of get you on the hook with that. But yeah, it took a second to get used to it because, you're taught your whole life, don't look at the camera, I suppose I played Oliver Hardy in Stan and Ollie, and that sort of prepared me for it, but it was a lot of fun. To answer your question, it was a blast getting to look right in the camera and have that direct relationship with the audience.
For Quincy, thanks. As someone from Michigan, if I Googled you correctly, what was the pressure or the honor or what have you of playing Magic? Were there uncles involved that say, no? I remember watching him, back in the day. What was that like for you, sort of portraying someone from the same place?
Yeah, it's a dream come true. I remember the first thing I ever wanted to do was play basketball. And my hero actually growing up was Shaq, and being able to know like where the Lakers were when I was growing up and I knew Magic played for him and I knew he was one of the greatest players of all time, but I just didn't know the type of influence he held as a player. I knew him as a businessman more, I knew that he had made Starbucks one of a household name and or helped it to become that way. And like the 24-hour fitnesses and the movie theaters, all this stuff about Magic now. I didn't realize just how influential he was to keeping basketball alive, And so that came once I actually booked the role, like of knowing that side of him. And mostly the things that I used to hear about Magic, it was mostly like about him just coming from Michigan and being great at basketball, but like you don't know until you get to see it. And we have YouTube now where you can go look at his highlights and just see how electrifying, how much the fans were in it. And just, it was a lot of passion going into the sport that I didn't realize it wasn't as much there before him. And Bird and, Dr. J, and, and they just ushered in a new way of playing the game. And it was cool to be able to relive that and find that out along the way as I was doing it. So,
yeah. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, those were great. I mean, you could hear the excitement in Quincy Isaiah's voice, for that role. And so I'm pretty excited to, see how this show plays out. I mean, just from those little small segments, this looks great. Sounds great.
Yeah. Well, let's pivot from two of the main characters into the directors and the producers behind the show. Next up, we've got some clips from Max Borenstein and Rodney Barnes, who are the executive producers, and they help write and direct some of these episodes. There's various directors, but they're going to give you some of the behind the scenes on this. One of the main question that I wanted to ask Max Borenstein is about this being fictionalized. It absolutely tells you right away, this is a dramatization. This is fictionalized. There are things in this that will not make the characters being portrayed very happy. Magic Johnson has his own series coming out, more based directly on his life, and he in control of it on Apple. He's not involved in this. Kareem didn't have any interest in helping out with this. I can imagine Jerry West, and we'll get into this in a minute. Jerry West and the people of West Virginia and people that think of him in a certain way might be traumatized because he's a major character early in this, and it's not the Jerry West that you think of. So I asked Max Borenstein about how in the age of 30 for 30, you bring a docuseries in where you take some liberties with these characters. And on the follow-up question, Rodney Barnes will also jump in on having so many rookies in the cast in crucial roles, like we said, with Quincy Isaiah as Magic and Solomon Hughes as Kareem. So let's take a listen.
Yeah, let's jump into that.
Thanks very much. For both our gentlemen, either one that wants to take it. So much of the sports storytelling now seems to be the 30 for 30 kind of genre, and many of them are good, but it's archival footage. Then it's maybe the older athlete talking about what he thinks he thought he felt back then. How do you think, how much reception is an audience going to be, hungry for this, where you obviously you are dramatizing some of this and it's based in fact, but it's just a great story. And there's things that a 30 for 30 or a doc would never be able to present.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's exciting about it is for us creatively is that we get to get in those rooms that you can't get into. No one has footage of. And yes, we're imagining our way into it. We're doing a great amount of research. And we're trying to do our best to be true to what we believe these characters would have felt and thought in the moment. But that's the beauty of a dramatization. Is documentaries are incredible, but there's a certain they can go deep in certain factual ways. But a dramatization, there's nothing like that to be able to get into the soul.
Adding another layer to that experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's important as well, because there are the facts and then there's the emotion that's under the facts that sometimes a documentary can't necessarily hit in the same way. And I think plus all of the other stuff around it, the context to the time that it took place in goes beyond just the facts. And I think we do a really good job at contextualizing both. We get the period of time that it was set in, which tells one aspect of the story, the fact itself, and then the emotional component as well.
To use the sports analogy, I guess you had some rookies in the lineup as far as IMDb database credits in Quincy and Solomon in really key crucial parts. What's the trepidation level of you guys going into this, hoping this thing turns out well? And it turned out really well.
Thank you. Well, no, it's the truth is it's hard to imagine one of those roles would be the hardest role you ever had to cast for a lot of people, right? I think, finding an actor who can portray an iconic figure like Magic Johnson, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, can look like them, can play basketball believably, has the height and has the specific personality type that, Magic is as charismatic as the most charismatic movie star. That's not something you can act. That you have to have. Quincy Isaiah has it. So, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has to have the gravitas and intellectual heft
Introspection.
Introspection that very few
Mhm.
people have, not to mention also 7 foot tall, looks like Kareem and can play basketball. And Solomon Hughes is a doctorate in education policy who played for the Globetrotters. So
And loves jazz.
and loves jazz. So our casting team, led by Francine Maisler and Melissa Kostenbrunner, just, they kind of managed to tick those boxes in an extraordinary way, after a nationwide or global search. And the truth is, I don't know about Rodney, had I thought about how hard it would have been or how unrealistic it was to expect to find these people, I don't know that I would have rationally taken on the project. But luckily I get, when falling in love with something, you have these nice blinders on and you just go ahead first. And then we got lucky.
And I think it's a testament when you look at those first 5 episodes to how hard both of those guys worked to get their game to the top levels. Like, you wouldn't think that they had never acted before when you watch this show. And I think it's a testament to both of those guys. So kudos to them.
So it's interesting that we touched on, that some of these legendary athletes like Magic and Kareem aren't involved in the show, because sometimes there is a level of creative freedom that writers and directors want. They don't want to have to always cater to who this person is in real life. They want to give you a character that they created. So it's almost, in a way, good that some of these guys weren't involved, because it opens up creative freedom for how they want to portray these ultimately who they are. Characters is what they are in the show. So I think that's pretty great that some of them weren't involved.
Yeah, absolutely. The closest that they get is DeVaughn Nixon. He is actually the son of Norm Nixon. Bears a striking resemblance, and he's involved. So that provides us a great segue. Let's listen in on a couple of questions with DeVaughn Nixon, who's Norm Nixon, as we said. Jason Segel, you'll know him from How I Met Your Mother, various other shows, funny guy, a comedian. He plays Paul Westhead, one of the architects of the offense that created Showtime. And Tracy Letts, you'll hear him interject in a couple of questions. He plays Jack McKinney, who was truly the architect of the run and gun offense that the Lakers perfected. Didn't really get to reap the benefits. If you know the history of it, suffered a terrible bicycle accident, a traumatic head injury, and was eventually replaced, starting the cycle of dominoes that led to Pat Reilly eventually becoming the coach of the Lakers. So jumping in, we're going to talk to DeVaughn Nixon and Jason Segel about growing up as kids in LA. They were both born in LA in the early 80s. What it was like being a child growing up with these memories of your team being great. Yeah. And DeVaughn gives us a great answer on what it was like when one of the players is also your dad. For DeVaughn, on not bringing the preconceived notions of his father to the set, because you're going to have a certain way that you think your father would do things. And if you have to portray them in a negative light, maybe you get a little jaded by that.
At Thanksgiving dinner.
Absolutely. And for Jason, Wikipedia claimed that he was a 2-time high school state basketball champ in California that won a slam dunk contest. It was nicknamed Dr. Dunk. He had a little bit of fun with that answer. And I asked him, being so good at such a young age, what players on the set would he be able to destroy in a game of one-on-one? He had some fun with that. So let's take a listen to those.
Yeah. Hi, thanks for your time today. For DeVaughn and Jason, I believe you were both born in LA in the early 80s. So I'm interested to see what it was like, that Showtime team as childhood memories. I'm sure, DeVaughn, I'm sure yours is different and more quite vivid, but they were great as you were getting to maybe a period of time when you were starting to get into sports. Just what was that whole vibe like for a kid having their guys do that?
For me, it was just I was completely oblivious to the concept of celebrity. So, me watching my father on television, it was just like, he has a normal job. I mean, he's just on TV. So I didn't really, I don't think the concept of celebrity back then is what it is now. Television is definitely on a bigger spectrum now. More people can watch, and there's things that stream and Netflix. So I mean, for me, it was just like, oh, my dad's playing basketball. I guess he's pretty good. But what really the shift is when I got older. And, you know, I remember my dad still lives in Santa Monica. And I remember we would have movie nights, me, him, my stepmom, my brother, and my sister, and we would go out to the 3rd Street Promenade. And the heads that would turn. And I'm like, how does my dad know so many people on the Promenade? Did he used to work here? Like, what the hell is going on? You know what I mean? So I think that's when the realization really kicked in for me. And, you know, and then fast forward to, you know, when I was older as well, and I would go to the Staples Center and I would see, you know, James Worthy walk up to him, Magic, and shake hands, and the respect between all those men kind of let me know that, you know, he did his thing. So that's, you know, that's kind of my most vivid memories of the whole experience.
My father is Kurt Rambis, and I have very similar set of memories. No, I grew up idolizing my brother, who's 5 years older and was like 3 or 4 sport varsity athlete. And I just wanted to be like him. And so I started playing basketball pretty young. I was also 6'4" when I was 12. So you're sort of forced into that. Oh yeah, man. That's not a good age to be 6'4". The kids once stood around me in a circle while one by one they would jump on my back and the others would chant, "Ride the oaf, ride the oaf." So I turned out to be a comedian. But
they might have done that. They might have done that regardless of your size.
Yes, no, absolutely. But I grew up loving the Lakers. I had posters up. My brother loved the Celtics, and so it was a great in-house rivalry. Half of my family lives in Boston, and so it really is a dream come true for me to do this show.
For DeVaughn, what's the balance between bringing, like, obviously you are well versed in the research for your part, but but you'll bring certain preconceived notions of what you know or what you've heard growing up versus like what the director wants, or if the character has to do something that doesn't portray them in a good light. What is that balance? Because like the backstories, you were there, you lived it, versus what's going to be in the movie. I mean, how hard is that?
I mean, for me, they kind of, what was really cool about it is they came to me for source material a lot of the times, and they kind of just let me do my own thing. I mean, obviously, I know my dad better than anybody, so they let me literally really have the creative freedom of bringing Norm to the screen. So I mean, I know my dad's mannerisms. I have a lot of them innately. It was fun because I feel like I kind of got to just be free. I didn't really get too many notes. If I needed to do something, if I wasn't hitting a point, but in terms of, my posture, my mannerisms, or how I was speaking, it was all my choice. And that's what I loved about it. And, improv was a very cool thing. I've actually never worked on a project where I got to improv as much as this one. So it was fun, them just letting us riff and just go off. And, that's what I love the most about this. So, man, it wasn't, I didn't really have to find, I mean, I kind of had to find a little bit of a balance, but I mean, I think they just let me do my thing, to be honest. And that's why, I was so married to this and I loved it.
Great. Thank you. Jason, according to the internet, which never lies, you won 2 state championships and a slam dunk contest one time. And you were quite tall, even except for the ogre stuff. But if you were to challenge like some of the guys in the cast to a game of one-on-one, there must be some of those guys that you could wipe out. Like who do you think you would show up?
I'd beat DeVaughn, handle, slaughter.
Kill me.
It'd be humiliating for DeVaughn and anyone who's friends with DeVaughn if he and I played one-on-one basketball, because I'm so good at basketball.
Yeah. And by the way, you won that slam dunk contest? That's what I just heard, that you won it? You didn't win that, did you?
Listen, here's the truth of it. I finished second in that slam dunk contest.
Oh.
Yeah. I won one state championship, and then I left the team to go be an actor. Also, I will say that I had 2 identical 7-footers on that high school team. So I wasn't necessarily...
Who wound up in the pros?
Wound up in the pros. So I wasn't necessarily option 1 on this team. That said, with all of these exaggerations of history, with age, with my declining speed and ability, I would still slaughter DeVaughn in a game of one-on-one.
Fair enough. I'll take that.
Okay, cool. Put that in print.
I got to go correct Wikipedia now.
Okay, good.
And following up on that, I did correct Jason Segel's Wikipedia page. No, I actually didn't. I left it the way it is. And I want him to forever be known as Dr. Dunk, whether or not he actually did win that dunk contest. So, interesting insights from those two, especially growing up in LA as kids, as Showtime was being born as they were, honestly.
I mean, it's very... one, I'm glad that this ensemble has been put together for a show, because I do like these guys bounce off each other very well. Adam knows how to bring I feel like these guys have been in like the creative process for a really long time. And kind of much like you said, they're from California. They're portraying people that they grew up watching, or, that were coming to the pinnacle of their performance from a young age. So I'm pretty sure like Jason Segel is, kind of being like a little fanboy being in the show. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, it was fun. So let's keep moving on to this. This was one of my favorite little groups. In modern journalism, there were a couple of us in a Zoom call with the talents, us looking at them and they looking at us. Yeah. And this group was Jason Clarke. He plays Jerry West. Adrien Brody was Pat Reilly, Academy Award winner, not Pat Reilly. And then Solomon Hughes, who plays Kareem. So, we mentioned his background. He was a captain of the Cal basketball team. He was a Globetrotter. He has a PhD. He is in higher education. This man's a professor. It's no joke. But he had an absolute desire to act. And it's funny, everyone who is great at something wants to be something else. And it was very much the case with Solomon Hughes. So in this segment, my first question is to Solomon. Just please give me the backstory on how a successful person such as yourself landed your very first role in this series, which is probably going to be, very successful. It's booked for 10 episodes, season 1, and they're already planning to do a season 2, so that's going to happen. Ooh, and nice. Secondly, with Jason Clarke, so far my favorite role. Like I said, this portrayal is going to explode the imagery of Jerry West, either as the logo or this quiet man in a blazer with the perfect hair. He's always been known as a tortured individual, but because this is a drama, they get to take him some places that Jerry West would absolutely not take you on his own. So let's take a listen to this.
This would be great.
Hi, thanks for your time, gentlemen. This is for Solomon. Knowing that you have some similar backstory to Kareem, right down to being a jazz guy, so I'm told. I'm curious how you went from a really distinguished career in higher education to this acting credit. There's certainly a story there. I'd love to hear what that is.
Sure. I grew up in a family where we were very aware of the arts. We watched The Cosby Show religiously. And Ethel Ayler, who played Claire Huxtable's mother, is my great-great-grandfather was her grandfather. And so there was always this family connection to film and TV. And I'd always been obsessed with the space. And I went as far as, after I graduated from college, I moved to LA and met with a talent agent. Nothing came of it. And so I played professionally for a few years. And I feel like I'm the kind of person that just wants to find workspaces where I really can connect my passions to what I'm doing. And just to get the opportunity to audition was really a dream come true because my life has personally been deeply impacted by by the work of people who are actors. And so, yeah, film and TV, I mean, it's just had such a, when I think about, I've taught on the college level, I've taught on the high school level, and those are traditional learning spaces. But when I think about what I've learned sitting in theaters or sitting in movie theaters or sitting in live theaters, it's like, I'm putting Adrien on the spot, but like when I saw The Pianist, like that's one of a handful of films where after I saw it, I went out of my way to make sure other people saw it because it literally changed my life. So yeah, I mean, it's a space that I've had just such reverence for. So.
Thanks a lot. For Jason, a lot of people, I think, when they think of Jerry West, they either think of the NBA logo or they think of archival footage of him in college or with the Lakers or the older man who was a basketball executive. And you obviously get to run around and have some fun with this really complex and a guy that we often read about it being sort of this tortured soul that struggles to be happy. How much do you think that's going to blow the mind of the average basketball fan who thinks of those three things? And like, how fun was that getting just to run with that guy in those first few episodes?
It was great fun. It was really great fun. I mean, you're always looking for those in-between moments, aren't you? That go to show, how we ended up or how we all ended up to where we are now and why, understanding it. It was great. I think, it's funny because it's also part of Jerry's narrative and understanding himself that he really seems to come to terms with he struggled and he never had the tools or the mechanisms to, coming out of West Virginia, you didn't go and see a shrink. You probably didn't even know what a shrink was, and then it's that other idea of Kareem being a winner. I mean, that dude won since primary school. To Jerry, even though we assume he's this demigod of basketball, his achievements speak for themselves and everything as a player, that he just lost, man. I mean, and he lost. I mean, there's a picture in his autobiography of him and Bill Russell sleeping on a plane coming back from the Olympics, and it's just like he's caption that Jerry's written is me beating Bill Russell at a sleeping competition, and it's like Bill Russell beat him. In those 5 or 10 seconds at the end of a game that feel like a lifetime or feel like a year, and it psychologically him up, and then, to pick him up at this point, as you said, you're right in spacing it out to where he's at now and who he became is really lovely because you're seeing what I think every professional athlete or everybody who's really busted their ass at everything in their life and given their all, something they love, you have to deal with what now and what did it all mean? Does it want me? Is it rejecting what I like? It's making him ill, and he's at that point, he's got his 2 kids, his marriage is not worked out and he's just, so it's like, I love picking it up at that point. I really do. And I think it gives an idea of what all these athletes and these titans of this particular time went through from Pat, to Kareem, to Jerry West, to Jerry Buss. And I hope that people, I think we've shot in a way that people can really empathize by going with them rather than, pointing fingers at them, because they achieved extraordinary stuff and still do. They're all continuing to contribute, not just to the sport, but to the arena and to the country, Jerry particularly.
So first off, that was probably by far my favorite segment. One, because that group of actors are probably my favorite to watch on screen. From, much like Solomon said, Adrien Brody and The Pianist. I like him in Grand Budapest Hotel. Clarke, he's in Wall Street Money Never Sleeps. He's also in the movie Lawless with Tom Hardy and Shia LaBeouf, which is one of my favorite performances by him. So to see him portray Jerry West and Brody portray Pat Reilly, I mean, that would have sold me the show by itself.
Yeah. Brody does a great job delivering the sad sack early. Pat Reilly, the one between the playing days,
one that always looks sad all the time.
Well, we think of him with the greasy, the slick hair. I'm sure it was $1,000 can pomade and the really expensive suits. But we see him in some really dark times, and it's really interesting to watch that. So, all right. So moving on. This was I'm going to tell you, I was a little bit intimidated in this part by like the 70-something-year-old lady, because it was Sally Field in this segment. She plays Jessie Buss, Dr. Jerry's Buss's mother, and sort of the accountant of this really leaky financial empire that he is trying to put together to buy the Lakers and keep the Lakers and grow it into what it became.
And so she plays John C. Reilly's mom in this film,
exactly.
right?
And they have some really fun interaction. She's not in the movie a ton because why? But she does a great job with the parts she had. So
their whole budget probably would have been waste on her if she had been in a little bit longer.
Yeah, she puts out a lot of light. I don't know if she would have sort of overshadowed, but we'll see. But so I asked her, because I was particularly interested in her insights. Where were you during showtime? I'd seen photographs of her at Laker games, but I wanted to get her perspective as someone who was on the ground from LA and what this was like. And got a really good answer from her on acting in an ensemble cast with so much diversity, in the sense that she's got a big trophy case full of awards and a lot of roles, and some of the others have none. And she jokingly referred to herself as the old lady they kept in the attic, which certainly wasn't true. And I asked her about, what was it like being a possible source of information for these whippersnappers, learning what the 80s were really like.
Hi, thanks for your time. This is Reilly. I'm interested to get your perspective. Did you attend games, these Lakers games at the time? I've seen like pictures of you going to Lakers games in 2008. I mean, was it of interest to you at that point in time? And what's that perspective like bringing it to this project?
I was there. This was a big part of my life. I would have done this had I not read anything, because they said this Laker. I said, I want to do it. This was a huge part of my life, because I too was a single parent. I had 2 little boys. It was my way to create a world that I could live in with them. They were, if I made them to do something with me, it would be like, oh God, who wants to do that? But it was the Laker games. It was what we did together. And I was there. I watched Magic at this time. I watched Kareem. We watched the evolution of all of it. I watched young Kobe when he came on the set, when he came in the arena for the first time. My 2 older boys were there, who, when we started, they were, young, they were 12 and 10 or something. And then as they got older, and then my youngest son, who became, you'd have to argue that he might very well be the world's biggest Laker fan. He knows every statistic of everything. He's in his mid-30s now, but we still, when there's a game on, we're all texting to each. Did you see that? Is he hurt? Is he hurt? How bad is it? I don't know. I think it's down. I think he's down. He's down. It's his knee again. Oh my God, no. So this was a big, big part of my life. It was a part of my knowing how to parent. It was my way into my boys.
The acting experience is all over the map. It seems on this. From some of the actors have just a little to none. You've got Solomon coming from he played basketball, but he was in academia and just nailing it with Kareem. Just talk about this group and it's how this is coming together and how it's worked so well from what we've seen so far. I'm sure it's great all the way through.
It was so huge. It's such a huge, I wish I should have saved one of the call sheets, that's like 140 feet long, or 4 or 5 pages of just actors alone. For me, it was frustrating because I'm the old woman in the attic and I'm just locked away. I would see these other young actors, the new actors, and the iconic actors. I would see them coming to work. I would see them in base camp. Maybe I had 1 or 2 scenes in the morning and they have a scene at night. Or there was always basketball practice. They always had rehearsal. And they were always rehearsing like a dance routine. And I could see them coming in the latter half of the day, and I could meet them and say hi, but I didn't ever get to see them play. I kept saying, doesn't Jessie go to a game, for God's sakes? What the hell? I'm locked away. But I know we've got brand new actors, and then we have actors that have been here a day and a half too long. Then we have ones in between. It is a huge project with so many stories going on at the same time, which makes it really fun. And also we would look at each other and say, what are they doing? When is the last time? Who's working? What's happening? So for me, it'll be interesting to actually watch the shows and see, I read them all, but to see it all come together will be interesting.
So expanding on the lady in the attic, at no point did you sort of become like the cultural attaché of the 1980s for like so many people in the cast who only saw the 1980s on YouTube, like at all? You're a resource.
I know I could have brought them to my house. I could have sat them down and said, okay, first we're going to look here. I'm going to show you everything I've had for the last 40 years of my life. I should have been the encyclopedia. In some ways I was kind of, I found myself being a bit of a know-it-all about, I saw that game, and I certainly was there at the time in the 70s and was raised in this town in Los Angeles. So I was there, but I was hung up in the clothes too. So I just became, all I could see was that tiger outfit. And but I still have all of this stuff in my life that's from that era.
So that was fun. Sally Field. Another part of the show that's really interesting. It uses a lot of cinematic elements, including, as the directors told us, some cameras that don't even get produced anymore. You can't buy them. You had to find them in pawn shops. They give it a real gritty, grainy feel. For folks that were alive in the 80s and watching this, you will get the sense that you're watching your really awful television that's not high def.
Like vintage film, like vintage
It
stuff.
is.
Yeah.
Some of it is not perfect, intentionally not perfect. You got a lot of grit and grain, and it's really well done. They do a very good job in the same vein as with the costuming in setting a tone on this. So
if they need a salesman for this show, I believe they've found the man in Brant James right here. You
give me half of the season free, and I'm probably at least half on board. But it was well done. It was well done. Okay, for you, the Boston guy, this is your segment. This is Michael Chiklis. And he's great. He's even a little foul mouth, so he'll be super fun. He gets to play Red Auerbach, and he absolutely dives into this. And one of the really crucial moments early in the show is when Dr. Buss reaches out to sort of ask for his help on how to do this. And Auerbach not only throws it back in his face, but there's a great scene where he drops his stogie at center court of the forum. And, stamps it out and lets it burn, which is a great part of the show.
Before we get into that, just so people know, if it's not clear yet, Brant is the only one that has seen these episodes. I am coming in cold, which makes it that much better that I'm hearing this stuff for the first time. So it's great. So with that, let's roll into this next one.
Yeah, you gotta know a guy who knows a guy. So, so in this segment, I asked Michael Chiklis about the opinion. Like I said, he's from Boston, born, raised, educated. He's about 58, so he was a sports fan then. He knew what was going on. What it was like in Boston, totally different style of play, different culture, knowing how Boston people are, watching the Lakers build what they were building. And it's funny, being a Boston guy, he even weaves some Yankee stuff in here. You'll hear him mention Russ. He didn't call me Russ. There was another reporter on named Russ Cohen who had a Yankee hat on, and it caught Michael Chiklis's eye. And he just, being from Boston, couldn't let that go. So let's take a listen.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate your time. If you could dig back into your memories of the period of time being there and, where you grew up, what was that mood around people you hung out with, like what the Lakers were doing out there? Because obviously the culture of the game and everything was very different, not knowing the inside story, the personalities like you've done now through your research. But what did just people think about what was happening out in LA?
Back then?
Yeah.
We didn't, initially at least. Honestly, from my perspective, I was a college student during this time, 81 to 85, I was at Boston University. And the Celtics were our championship team, right? I mean, we did have a little bit of fun with the Bruins there in the early 70s, but aside from that, we were long suffering. Listen, I don't have hate in my heart, Russ, for any person, place, or thing, but I hate the fucking Yankees, man. And I respect them, mad respect, but and Brant, I'm gonna get back to your question.
No, you're doing great.
But I gotta say this, Russ, that one of the prides of my life is that I was asked by MLB to do the voiceover for the retrospective on Jeter when he retired. And I'm just philosophically speaking to you about my philosophy regarding sport. Is that, and I was thrilled to do it because I believed, as they did, that the reason why they wanted me to do it was because a hardcore Red Sox fan should do it because he transcended the rivalry. So as much as I love and enjoy rivalry and I get into it, I am still a fan of sports. And if you can't tip your hat to Magic Johnson, then you're just an asshole. You know what I mean? You gotta have respect for these guys. You have to respect your rivals and see them for their own greatness too. Like so many people hate on the great Tom Brady. And if you don't get it by now, get out of here. Come on, stop it. You have to tip the hat. And so I just wanted to get that out of the way, Russ, that I saw that Yankee hat. All due respect, Mariano Rivera, come on. Greatest closer of all time. Anyway, so back to your question, Brent. Perception at the time, I was in college. They were the kings of the universe. And here's this team that just, on the one hand, it was infectious. You couldn't help but be drawn to them because of, we'd never seen anybody like them before. They were entertaining to watch. I mean, when I saw Magic Johnson for the first time, I was like, what? Look at this guy. How does he? I'd never seen anybody like him. Just in terms of the way he played and his charisma and that smile, he was electric. But at the same time, I was like, I guess I was not allowed to love them, So you just take the other side of it in deference to your own team. So I think that, from my perspective, we just dismissed them more than anything because they were like, and we would do what Yankee fans do, which is, 26 championships, and you dismiss the upstarts until they earn your respect, until they start to give you more than one nosebleed, and you start to go, hey, these guys are real, So does that answer your question? I think it's initially very sort of dismissive and disrespectful that turns into a grudging, holy crap, these guys are unreal,
So for me, it's exciting to see Chiklis in this role. One, because I do like his work. I was a big fan of The Shield. Loved that show. That was great. Didn't really like him that much in Fantastic Four, but he probably didn't like his role in that movie anyways. But to see him, much like you said, being from Boston, being able to portray a legend there in Boston, I'm excited to see how they expand on that role that he has, because it's great. It sounds great. But yeah, it is one of those things. The Celtics were dominant leading up to this point where the Lakers decided to turn it around. And it's basically like they're giving them the blueprint on how to beat them. And what do? They just run with it and become the dominant force that we all know them to be.
Yeah, it's great. I don't know how much longer he'll be in the show, but his moments were very important. And he did a great job with them. They were very good.
Nice.
Well, moving on to one of the underpinnings of the show, we're reminded very early and very often how icky the workplace was for females in the 70s and 80s. Especially in sports, apparently.
Yeah.
And Gaby Hoffmann she becomes the first ever manager of a major American sports arena, the Forum, when she's basically tasked with trying to find ways to make and save money and make the Forum more profitable for the Lakers before they really start, launching into the Magic era. She's an interesting individual. She is she was the little girl in Field of Dreams. She was the little girl in Uncle Buck. She doesn't work very much. She was to my knowledge, toward the internet's knowledge, the last love child of Andy Warhol, who grew up living in the Hotel Chelsea in New York. She's an interesting character, and she does a fascinating job with this very complex character in Winning Time. Okay. So we'll talk to her about the importance of the character Claire Rothman, the character she plays, getting locked down in LA for several months because they were going to shoot it just before the COVID lockdowns, and how that kind of brought an interesting edge to the set was a pretty good answer. And Cookie, who goes on to become Cookie Johnson, married for almost a half century now to Magic Johnson, is Tamera Tomakili. I asked her on how difficult it is to transition as an actress over a long span of time as a character. Now, granted, it's going from sort of teens to probably the upper 30s, but we'll see. And then they were all quite funny and great with these answers. So let's take this.
All right. Thanks very much. Brant James and HeyUSA. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. For Gaby, it's interesting in the show that they also make a point to show that, Claire was, I'll get it right, the first female manager of a major arena. She had an important job here too, that was obviously part of the engine of making this Lakers team go. Do you appreciate how they were able to show like, maybe the females were steering the ship while the guys were just kind of getting a little nuts there but they're getting all the attention? That's an important part of this, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's probably more rare in the world of sports than elsewhere. But, I think the idea that women were playing a major role in a lot of areas that we didn't know they were there is just true, and that we're starting to hear these stories and tell these stories is very, very exciting. I think that, in this first season, there's so much going on, and we're introducing so many characters and so many storylines. We're just being introduced to all these women, and we're getting a hint. Oh, they had a big role to play in this. But I think it's just the tip of the iceberg of really discovering and experiencing just how much their hearts, minds, souls, intellects, and creative powers were at play during this whole era.
Thank you. For Gaby, if I read correctly, you and your family relocated to the LA area just before one of the first COVID lockdowns to do the movie. I think that's right. It's not like you're in a third world country or anything, but what kind of edge does it add to the job when I can't go home? Everything is different. The world is falling down around our ears. Any anecdotes around that period?
Well, production was pushed, I think, a full year because of COVID. So I think it was really just such a relief and so much fun for all of us to finally be back on set. I don't work that often. I have 2 little kids. I choose to be home with them. I love being home with my family. It's such a privilege. But a full year of not getting to go to work and do what you do and play around, I almost forgot what the whole thing was about. So do you remember this, Mara? It was like, God, we're finally here. We get to do this. We get to play. We get to be together. It was just such fun. And it was really, I was worried about all the protocols. I was like, how are we supposed to be connected to one another when we're all did this? And like, the whole point is that we're in this thing together, and now we have to be a part of it. And, it was a little weird, but actually so much of the experience of what the job is was still allowed to rise to the top of all of that. So yeah, mostly it was just like such a nice release.
Very good. Thank you. Tamera, what's the challenge of playing a character over an expanse of time? I guess it's probably only going to be about 15 years unless you do 20 seasons of this, but like the age where you were like a high school, college kid, and you'll be a grown person when we get to 1991 in the show, there's a lot of transformation there. It's got to be more than just different hair, different clothes, right?
Hopefully black don't crack. So hopefully I will still look good. But no, I think when it comes to experiences, I think ultimately that's the most important thing, is that, we're able to still connect to what they are going through. And hopefully that transcends years and is something that I can kind of hold on to. Because I think I don't want to speak for everyone, but I definitely still hold on to a lot of like my experiences with people from when I'm young, because, I've had to learn and grow from them. And I think a lot of what great acting is being able to what's that word? To pull from experience, to be able to kind of like empathize and say, oh, this is something that I may not have gone through, or I may have gone through, so I can understand this character's experience, and to be able to drop into that. So hopefully, if we do go to 20 seasons, I don't think so. Hopefully that's something we can still hold on to.
Maybe you can just catch up to them. But yeah, I see what you're saying. Thank you.
So that last set of interviews, I mean, it's great that they're diving into things like that, because as fans, we don't really, not necessarily care, but understand the intricacies of, not only do people manage the team, but they also manage the stadiums, and they got to figure out, how to save money, concessions or halftime entertainment, or, how much you're going to ticket sales and things like that. So it's very interesting that they're also putting stuff like that in the show, which is, you don't see very often. It's kind of cool little added extra stuff that they're doing. So it's great.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for the actresses in those roles, because obviously they underpin the plot, but it's also a lot harder to go research that than it is to find out how Magic whipped a pass from behind his back. Or, Solomon Hughes, who said he had to practice hours and hours of the sky hook to try and make that thing look good. It's just a lot easier to do that than it is to figure out, how the manager ran the forum made it work.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, we hope everyone enjoyed, this behind the scenes look at it. Brant, you're going to be working on a story on this. Is that correct?
We're going to write some more about this before the premiere on March 6th. I have a feeling that this show is going to be a pretty big deal. If you want to read more about it, please check the description. Come to Play USA. We're going to be writing about it.
Like, follow, subscribe, and go watch the show.
Go shoot some hoops.